Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCAST, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the newest iteration of the Climate Coordination RCAST. This week we have a variety of relevant and hopefully interesting stories for everybody to enjoy, and hopefully this will give people some deeper knowledge about what's going on lately with climate and coordination. And we will probably also talk about some news with NFTs a little bit later as well. The first story that I have is from The Guardian, and I just love reading. The Guardian has an amazing section for environment, and they break it down into climate change, wildlife, energy, pollution, and some other topics. So if you're ever interested in figuring out what's going on with the environment, The Guardian is an extremely good resource because they break it down into these different categories, and I still haven't been paywalled, and I feel like I read a ton of Guardian pieces, so I just wanted to tell everybody about that resource. This is from California. Well, it's about California, I should say, from April 10th, 2021. And it says, scientists alarmed after 4 gray whales found dead in San Francisco Bay. Deaths discovered over a course of 9 days are just the tip of the iceberg for the species, says an expert. So I wanted to talk about this because I feel it's important to not only pay attention to our land use, but also to pay attention to the actual animals and individual wildlife that are harmed by our actions. It says here, 1 whale died after being struck by a ship, authorities confirmed, with investigations underway into the other mortalities. The carcass of a 41-foot adult female gray whale landed at San Francisco's Crissy Field on March 31st. A second adult female was found last Saturday in Moss Beach in San Mateo County. A third was found on Wednesday floating near the Berkeley Marina. And the following day, one washed up in Marin County at Muir Beach. The necropsy of the whale at Muir Beach revealed significant bruising and hemorrhaging to muscle around the jaw and neck, consistent with blunt force trauma due to a ship strike. Anyway, it goes on to talk about 13 whales that washed up in the Bay Area in 2019. It says the National Park Service reported that year previously that a large number of dead whales were being found. I don't know if some people remember that 2019 story, but I do.
I do.
Yes. So this is obviously something that is sort of developing and continuing. It says biologists have reported several recent cases of malnutrition in gray whales in the region. Nearly 1 in 4 whales migrating along the U.S. West Coast have died since the last recorded population surveys in 2015 and 16, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. It said losses could have been greater due to the limited boat and aerial surveys taken during the COVID-19 pandemic, but obviously there's potential for the losses to be lessened because there was less, there were less boats traveling during COVID. So obviously that was great for the whales. So I guess they're probably going to try to figure out exactly how this past year was for the whales. It says each winter, the whales migrate 10,000 miles to Mexican waters where they mate and birth calves near the coast of Baja California. How lovely. They head back north and stay off the coast of California in spring and summer to feed on anchovies, sardines, and krill before continuing on their northerly migration to cool, food-rich Arctic waters. So anyway, there's a big problem with whales dying, and I think a lot of it has to do with plastic pollution, and it seems like a lot of it has to do with the whales being struck by boats. And so again, this really just shows the need to really protect the coastal waters, because if we did that, since about 25%, I believe, of all ocean life lives and primarily in the coastal waters rather than the open ocean, we could really solve a lot of problems by doing that. And I feel like it's hopefully something that the Biden administration is considering. And just one last thing I wanted to say about this that I was surprised they didn't mention in this article was that just in February, and we mentioned this on a previous RCAST, there was a 600-gallon oil spill into the San Francisco Bay from Chevron, which I understand is now cleaned, or I'm not sure if it's fully cleaned up, but at least it was stopped. So I guess they don't believe that that oil spill was a factor in why these 4 whales showed up dead, but I'm just surprised that they didn't even mention, oh yeah, by the way, there was an oil spill in February. Maybe 600 gallons isn't enough to really affect the wildlife there, but anyway, I'll pause and see if anybody has any comments about this.
Well, it's a lot to take in. For whatever reason, I feel a special affinity to the cetaceans. I think maybe a lot of humans do. There's certainly a lot of stories and images around that particular family of critters. I do think that it's a bad sign when whales start disappearing. It does not bode well for humans.
That's right. Yeah, I'm writing another article about geologic time change on Earth and climate, and how something I learned from watching, I think it was the Sylvia Earle film, Mission Blue, I can't remember. But anyway, how we don't usually think about temperature change for wildlife in a realistic manner, and how we should think about it as the temperature changes in our own body. And how
Yes.
if you have a fever for a few days, that can be extremely serious.
Yes.
And that's a change of only a couple of degrees. And if you have like a 5-6 degree fever, you could die easily.
Yeah.
So that's one way that we can really understand the temperature changes that are affecting different ecosystems around the world. And somehow I never thought of it that way. But now that I think of it that way, I'm like, oh my God, we don't want the ocean to have a fever,
That's correct.
Yeah, I read an article a while back that was the kind of moment when I kind of really grokked with the situation that we're in, because it really explained the tender balance that the Earth is in to have provided this kind of life. So so the analogy was, let's say you fill up your bathtub full of water just to the top where the drain is at the very top, and you have just the right amount of water pressure so there's water still flowing out of the tap, and it's just enough to create a balance where the water is leaking out of the top of the drain and it's continually filled at the same level. Now, let's say that you open up the tap a little bit more, and it just takes a little bit, but you open up that tap a little bit more, the bathtub will eventually overflow.
Right. Yeah.
And that's basically what climate change is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one reason why people don't feel that it's maybe likely that we're able to alter the planet is that it's so big, and the ocean looks the same on the surface, whether it's healthy or dying. and a lot of people haven't even been to these natural landscapes like the Arctic. I've never been to the Arctic. So maybe that seems like they're too big to fail, but they're not.
Yeah, well, like just, your point about it being just there's a very tender little balance going on. Like there's just a matter of a few degrees and it tips the whole thing over. And it also just kind of makes you think, you know, wow, like out of all the planets that we've been
Right.
able to see from our, best telescopes, we have yet to find another one that has achieved that same kind of perfect situation for at least the kind of life that we're aware of. And so it also kind of makes you go, it's kind of precious.
It's extremely precious. I mean, it's precious doesn't even cover it.
Yeah.
It's there's no word to even describe how special it is that we have life, and not just that we have life, but that we have rainforests and jaguars and dolphins and ourselves, and we've got everything, and it's crazy what's going on, that people have lost that perspective. And um when I was writing this blog piece, this new one, I was really thinking a lot about just sort of the length of time it takes to create what we have now is like 4.5 billion years ish on Earth, and that doesn't even include the formation of the universe before that, which I think is another 10 billion years or so, if I'm correct. But so that is arising nature, basically biodiversity, evolution. And then on the other hand, you have, well, I guess on the same hand, you have humans that are eventually gaining the potential to leave the planet. And I think it's so fascinating that those things happen at basically the same time, that we gained the technology and the spirit, I guess, to leave the planet at basically precisely the time that the environment started to break down. And I just find that really fascinating.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we have to choose between those two things. I think it's definitely possible to explore other planets and become a multiplanetary species eventually, and also save Earth. And actually, there are some scientists, some astronauts, and others who believe that the more humans go into space, the more they will have this, what's called the overview effect, I think it's called, which
Right.
basically means that you have like a new appreciation for life on Earth and peace and nature and all that stuff, because you've seen it from the outside. I think it would be really useful if we could try to have that awareness without having to go to space. But some people believe that the more humans that go to space, the more we will appreciate the gem that we live on and how rare it is. We don't even know how rare it is. That's how rare it is. We literally can't find even a way to describe how rare it is. So
Yeah, it's like what blows my mind is that something spawns the universe spawns galaxies, galaxies spawns solar system, the solar system spawns the sun spawns this planet that we are all here on, and the planet spawns this creature that somehow believes it's separate from it all. It's so absurd.
right, exactly. Whoops. Yeah, we need to figure that one out. I think that's going to be a major step towards solving a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's interesting in the Choying Zod teachings that I've been listening to. There is this continual reference to the magical display, the arising of the appearances, which are in some sense the root of our belief that we are separate, or that things are in fact separate. And but one of the things that they don't talk about is, why does this magical display arise, right? If you're going to spend a text that takes weeks and weeks to expound, and in that weeks you're continually talking about how that magical display is not real, then at some point someone is going to say, methinks the lady doth protest too much. Right. And so there's I had a friend of mine, Jane Mabry Smith, recently wrote that she felt that the ego response is like an inflammatory response. But you don't want to remain in continual inflammation. You want to figure out, like, what are you doing that's creating the inflammation in terms of your actions, your diet, your sleep, and all of those other things. And I think there's some, there might be some similar kind of thing. What are the conditions under which you are constantly subjected to the magical display? What are the reasons that it arises? And I think that's related to your question, Nora. It's like, I guess Daryl posed it, why do we think that we are separate?
Right.
There might have been something of utility in that view of separation, but we need it. Once you get a larger view, then its ultimate utility kind of shifts and changes.
Yeah, I think it's connected to when we started to stay put, when we started to kind of evolve to a more agrarian culture. And then from there started to kind of formulate larger clumps of people in cities. And kind of, I think, because that's when a lot of the religious origins of those concepts came. The idea that, God gave man dominion over the earth and made man in his own image, and, that kind of crazy talk. It kind of originated from that same general time period.
Yeah. I mean, that was how America was made too, with that kind of thought. I agree.
Here is a land for us to come and plunder and utilize because God gave it to us to do that with.
Right. Yeah. And the only people who have any say or power are white men, basically, which is astounding. But yeah, I agree with you. I also think maybe it could be like kind of a coping mechanism emotionally to deal with what we do to nature and all the things that we need from nature, and the things that we eat and wear and all that stuff, especially hundreds or thousands of years ago, and possibly maybe some type of a coping mechanism to just deal with that. If you see nature as separate from yourself, then it's easier to destroy it for your own benefit,
Yeah. You were talking about that kind of realization that astronauts have when they see the Earth from outer space.
Yes.
There's an astronaut here in Canada. I don't know how well known he is outside of Canada, but he's really famous here. His name's Chris Hadfield.
Yeah, he's famous here.
Okay. Yeah. He played like the David Bowie cover from space.
Yeah.
He's great.
To Major Tom. Yeah. Anyway.
Awesome.
So he called my daughter's Montessori school when she was like 8. I think she was 8. He was kind of doing that. He was calling schools from outer space.
Wow.
And Vivian was blown away by that. Like, and one of the things that, he would always tell the kids is that same thing. It's just like, when you experience what I've seen, it's truly profound. And he, just kind of really instilled the thought in these young kids' minds of how important it is to take care of this planet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's so important. I have a friend right now who's training to go to space, and that's the whole reason she wants to go, is to study that effect. And
nice. That's nice.
Yeah, she's an environmentalist, I guess you could say, but she's kind of a nature artist. And she's been drawing and documenting all sorts of different life networks on Earth. But her next goal is to go to space so that she can, I guess, make some kind of connection there or help other people to make that connection. I'm not exactly sure what the goal is, but I'm behind it 100%. So I do have the next story.
Nice.
If it's okay to move on, unless you have something else to add, anybody?
Oh, please.
Okay. So this is from AP. This is from also April 10th. Sometimes I think that the climate movement is, I don't know, it's kind of focused in America maybe, or sometimes I forget how international this movement really is. And so I just wanted to share this awesome story from Serbia. Serbia, for anybody who doesn't know, is Eastern European country, borders Romania and I think Bulgaria as well. It says thousands rally in Serbia to protect the environment In Belgrade, protesters in Serbia rallied Saturday, demanding that the government protect the environment in a Balkan nation that has seen record levels of air pollution and scores of other ecological problems following decades of neglect. How familiar. It says several thousand people gathered outside of the Serbian parliament building in the capital of Belgrade for an ecological uprising against what organizers say is a widespread environmental devastation in the nation aspiring to join the European Union. Serbia has faced mounting problems that include poor garbage management and high pollution caused by use of poor quality coal and other pollutants. Rivers have been polluted by toxic industrial waste in many cities, including Belgrade, lack good sewage and wastewater systems. Protesters carried banners reading "Cut corruption and crime, not forests," or "Water is life and plant a tree." So I just think this is so cool that people all over the world like are just saying that this is not going to go, and they are willing to peacefully protest. And sometimes I forget that this is still going on. And sometimes I forget that the whole world is really united in this. Like, I feel that people, no matter what country, what environment, you see people protesting all across Africa, all across Europe, like everywhere. And I just think it's so cool and so inspiring that people are, like, no matter where they live, what language they speak, old nation, new nation, whatever, they're willing to just stand up and deal with this. Like, people are not rolling over and just saying, well, there goes the earth. They're really not doing that. And I just feel like it's such a powerful reminder to remember that people really do care. And even if people don't have that profound awareness that someone like Chris Hadfield has, I feel like they maybe have a deeper soul level of awareness, hopefully. And maybe that's starting to be a little more shaken up. It says here, the Balkan nations must substantially improve their environmental protection policies if they want to move forward in their bid to join the 27-nation European Union. Impoverished and marred by corruption after years of crises in the 1990s, many Balkan countries have pushed environmental issues to the sidelines. Yeah, I mean, that's so common. Where there's corruption, the environment is always one of the first things to be abused, I feel. One of the protesters said, quote, "This is our country. You are all welcome, the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, but under one condition, there must be no poisoning of our children." So anyway, I just wanted to share this because I just love to see that people still care and that the protests are getting bigger, not smaller, even this year. And that it seems like the world is really united and not being willing to back down from what's happening. So I just wanted to tell everyone that Serbia is with us.
Well, that's a wonderful story. I notice in my mind, the thing that arises for me is one of the most effective forms of protest is like rewilding your backyard, learning how to design your garden from permaculture principles, becoming a little bit more self-sufficient, a little more off the grid, and so that we don't depend upon the same manufacturing supply lines. Those kinds of things are also important forms of protest.
Yeah, that's
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, Daryl, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's interesting because those things that you list off, they don't immediately strike me as protest. I guess they are.
Well, they're a kind of economic protest, right? Rather, you're protesting the existing valuation of goods and services. You say, no, I'm not going to give my hard-earned capital, whatever that may be, to that system of values. It's just like what we were talking about last week when we were talking about the developer mindset. The person who looks at a neighborhood and sees every plot of green as a place to develop more of these god awful buildings. That's a particular valuation. It's a value system, and I think we have to protest that value system if we want to be able to have a planet to live on.
Yeah, you're here. You have to make the old value system obsolete.
Exactly. Yes.
But I also agree with Nora that it does seem like there's more attention towards the severity of climate change in recent weeks. I've just noticed it in the press more, and there seems to be larger corporations and companies that are kind of stepping up. I have two examples. There's this one that I actually just discovered last night. It's Time Magazine's latest cover. So the headline is Time Magazine's latest cover is so good, it's scary. And it was done by a Malaysian, because I guess this magazine is a Southeast Asia magazine. So I'll just kind of read a bit here. Time Magazine is famous for many things, from its up-to-date and insightful coverage of recent events to its vivid pictorials and accessible style of writing. But equally as important to Time's identity, if not most important, are its covers. Over the years, Time Magazine has become almost synonymous with its covers that have highlighted the most significant events or individuals in the current moment. Whether it was the tearing down of the Berlin Wall or the election of America's first ever non-white president or the numerous Person of the Year covers, each one has come to symbolize a topic that's truly iconic and relevant, and most have accomplished the task in a memorable, eye-catching fashion. For its upcoming April 26th, 2021 edition, Time thought to highlight the ever-growing and increasingly palpable threat of climate change. And for its cover, it sought out talented, she's actually really amazing, Malaysian artist Red Hong Yi, in the hopes that she delivers something truly memorable. And it turns out she has. And so I put the link in the chat, and I'll put the link in this call, the image in this call, because it's pretty grim. But she's amazing. Like, she's this performance artist that does all sorts of interesting things with different materials. But this image is of the planet, and there's matches kind of lighting up every continent. And you got to kind of see it. But yeah.
I can see it in my mind's eye. I've been looking at it ever since the satellite images of Australia during the fall of 2019.
Yeah, seeing the flames from space.
The entire continent was ablaze.
Yeah.
It was truly terrifying.
Yeah, that was weird. I remember seeing those images too. Yeah, so it seems like there's some like recent kind of big companies who are kind of stepping up. Like, so another example was this article my partner sent me about Google. They just released this thing called Timelapse, and it's kind of part of Google Earth, and it kind of just shows a kind of historical look. You can kind of go through this timeline styled interface and see how the Earth has changed over the last 4 decades. So yet another example of it seems like, some big companies are now kind of realizing that the media isn't doing the job, and so they kind of have to step in and kind of get the message out.
It's really interesting. I think the overview effect really requires a lot of the conditions of space. I remember there's this famous dialogue that Stuart Brand kind of, the mental considerations that Stuart Brand went through when he was making the whole Earth catalog. Because he was convinced that these pictures of the whole Earth from space would change society. That once people could see the Earth from space, they would realize how connected we are. I think the problem is that you can look at that picture from your couch, after you've had a few brewskis and some chips, and it doesn't have quite the same impact as if you really have to, attend to every little detail of your built environment, because, anything could pierce this tin can you're in, and make it a non-viable environment. And so there's a whole set of conditions that go along with the space experience. I think, we can easily, from our living room, look at Google Earth or many other satellite images and get a sense of that the Earth is a ball and we're living on it, and we can see how much it's changed. But the impact just doesn't land in the same way that it does for the astronauts. And I think a lot of that has to do with, the change in gravity and all of the very, very serious attention to detail that they have to attend to in order to stay alive.
Right. Yeah.
I guess another way of putting it, and this is the way I think about it, is that the worlds that we live in really have to do with the impressions that we take in. And a lot of those impressions are related to the kind of rituals and routines that we have to go through in order to maintain the set of impressions that we, regularly deliver to our consciousness, whether it's, our diet or our sleep patterns, whether it's walking the child to school or whatever those impressions are that go to maintaining. There's a cycle of actions that one does in order to maintain a set of impressions that sustains that sense of what your world is, and therein lies this capacity for world travel without ever leaving your neighborhood. You can literally change the world you live in just by changing the impressions that you take in. And that can be as simple as, changing something in your diet. And that then connects back to this form of protest. Like if you're eating out of your backyard garden, that's different than eating the hothouse tomatoes in the local supermarket. And it really does make it possible for one to experience a different world. It sounds wacky, but if you test it, I think you find that there's some veracity to it.
Nice. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Daryl, I know that you had a story about NFTs. We have time for that if you want to share that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sure. So yeah, I found this, there seems to be kind of a more and more press about the kind of climate impact of NFTs. So there's this article that I found, and then that article leads to another article that actually, I think, explained it more thoroughly. So I'll send you the link to both. But the first article is called NFTs Have a Climate Problem, and it goes through some stuff, very layperson kind of explanation of blockchain and stuff. And then the next article is entitled NFTs Are Shaking Up the Art World. They May Be Warming the Planet Too. And this is New York Times. So pretty major mainstream article. And maybe I'll just kind of read a little bit from it. But before I do, I want to highlight the author. The author is this woman named Hiroko Tabuchi. And I'm kind of inspired by this article, and I think I'm going to reach out to her because who knows, maybe she'll respond. Because she doesn't really get into that there's an alternative solution. So I'll read a bit from it here. Making the digital artworks requires colossal amounts of computing power, and that means greenhouse gases. When Chris Precht, an Austrian architect and artist, first learned about non-fungible tokens, the digital collectibles taking the art world by storm, he was so enthralled, he said he felt like a little kid again. So Mr. Precht, who's known for his work on ecological architecture, was devastated to learn that the artworks, known as NFTs, have an environmental footprint as mind-boggling as the gold rush frenzy they've whipped up. The numbers are just crushing, he said, from his studio in Pfaffenhofen, Austria, probably pronounced that wrong, announcing that he was canceling his plans, one of a growing number of artists who are swearing off NFTs despite the sky-high sums some have fetched at auctions. As much as it hurts financially and mentally, I just can't. Financially, for sure, last month, a montage of art that had been turned into an NFT by the digital artist known as Beeple sold for more than $69 million at a Christie's online auction. Also last month, an NFT created from a New York Times technology column sold for more than $500,000, with the proceeds going to the Neediest Cases Fund, a Times-affiliated charity. But by Mr. Precht's own calculations, creating the 300 items of digital art that he had planned to sell, 100 each of these of 3 art pieces, would have burned the same amount of electricity that an average European would otherwise use in 2 decades, he said in an Instagram video late last month. What in the warming world? An NFT is a piece of artwork stamped with a unique string of code and stored on a virtual ledger called a blockchain. Fanned by viral marketing, hubris, and perhaps some pandemic ennui, interest in the NFT market has exploded, driving up the price of digital artworks to fantastical levels. But blockchain technology, which also forms the basis of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, comes with enormous greenhouse gas emissions. In a nutshell, when an artist uploads a piece of art and clicks the button to mint it, she or he starts a process known as mining, which involves complex puzzles, awesome computing power, and a huge load of energy. That's because Ethereum, the platform of choice for NFTs, uses a method called proof of work to create digital assets like non-fungible tokens. Blah, 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 blah. Just gets into kind of the mechanics of proof of work. According to an estimate backed by independent researchers, the creation of an average NFT has a stunning environmental footprint of over 200 kilograms of planet-warming carbon, equivalent to driving 500 miles in a typical American gas-powered car. Other attempts to calculate the energy use of blockchain have also arrived at gargantuan numbers. Researchers at a Cambridge University have estimated that mining Bitcoin uses more electricity than entire countries like Argentina, Sweden, or Pakistan. A recently published paper in the journal Nature Communications warned that if left unchecked, crypto mining in China could undercut the nation's climate goals. I know it's difficult to comprehend, said Suzanne Kohler, an expert in life cycle analysis at Aalborg University in Denmark, who carried out an assessment of blockchain technology. You just click on a button or type a few words, and then suddenly you burn so much energy. Making the problem worse, Dr. Kohler said, was that solving the puzzles becomes more competitive and more difficult as interest in blockchain grows and people start mining. It just leads to bigger emissions impact unless their energy is carbon-free. Joni Lemercier, a French artist known for his futuristic light sculptures, was one of the first to dig into NFT's environmental consequences. He had just released 6 tokenized videos inspired by Platonic solids, which were snapped up by buyers. But he had heard of the growing alarm over Bitcoin's energy use, which worried him. Mr. Lemercier has also been involved in climate activism, campaigning for a move away from coal. He turned to Momo Acton, a computational engineer artist who carried some of the first calculations specific to NFTs and posted them on a site that he named cryptoart.wtf. Turns out my release of 6 crypto artworks consumed in 10 seconds more electricity than the entire studio over the last 2 years. He said he was putting future NFT releases on hold. It felt like madness to even consider continuing that practice. Then she goes through a bunch more examples like that of different artists that seem to be doing really interesting things too, by the way. So then it talks about proof of stake. So since announcing the idea several years ago, Ethereum has been vague on when the change will actually happen. Dankried Feist, a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, a nonprofit that's working with the network on the switch, said that by email that the effort would take another 6 to 12 months. Switching to proof of stake is not trivial for a network that currently already secures hundreds of billions of dollars in value. That's why it unfortunately can't happen overnight, or there'll be a high risk of failure, Mr. Feist said. A version of proof of stake has been live on Ethereum since late last year, but merging it with the main platform will be tricky. Yeah, so that's basically the article there. Is it kind of just basically highlights at the very end that, you know, there is a solution. proof of stake, and Ethereum can't do it, or at least not for a long time.
Thank you for sharing that piece. It's sad to me. I mean, it's really sad how much energy is being wasted on, well, I don't want to say wasted, but how energy intensive this all is. But I think the most sad thing to me is just that some artists can't take advantage of it because they don't feel it's ethically right.
Yeah.
So I feel like
no,
there's a huge
me,
amount
that's
of artists
super.
that RChain could reach out to.
That's super, super hopeful, right? That those artists have a degree of integrity that they won't sacrifice their planet to make a buck.
Yeah.
This is just like, yes, that's what it is to be human.
Yeah, I just think it's sad that like the artists
sacrifice.
are the ones who have to make that tough choice when a lot of them can't afford it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the oil execs that are making that decision. It's like these independent, beautiful, amazing artists who really deserve to be making a living. I guess that's the sad part of it. But yeah, no, I agree. Their courage is very inspiring, for sure.
Yeah, because I think there's a good ending to this story, and that ending involves RChain. Like, this is a New York Times article, and there's several artists that she lists off in this article who have pulled back, well-known, digital artists that are doing some really interesting artwork. They've pulled back from doing this because there is no alternative to their mind. So we need to go jump up and down and go, hey, we're here. It's like, the Horton Hears a Who, like, we're here.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, one of the interesting things is that that conception of NFT, which is different than the way we think about it, but that conception moves us ever closer to put the data on chain.
Yeah.
Right. In Ethereum, they're not actually putting the data on chain. They're linking the artwork with a piece of code that is then put on chain.
Right.
Right. But we could literally put the artwork on chain.
Yeah, I was thinking about what makes that better, and if I understand it right, doesn't it actually kind of make it more definitive and solid if you can actually put the actual thing that you're pointing to also right there immutably on the chain? Doesn't that actually make it more effective as an NFT?
Yes, it does. What it means is that the actual bits you can compare against what's on chain. So as opposed to, because what someone could do is to rewrite, to reverse engineer the watermark that's in the bits that are being distributed, right? And make a collection of those bits without the watermark. So this is all related to steganography. But here, what we're saying is, don't bother putting a watermark in the bits. Just put the bits on chain. And then if somebody is reproducing it, then you can just compare the bits, and you can compare the bits up to, some level of tolerance. So if someone is mucking with the resolution or other kinds of things, you can actually check for that. So there are many ways that you can actually implement more powerful digital rights management schemes if you actually have the bits on chain.
And I just had an idea that might be really great once did you guys just say in the beginning that the hard fork had to happen first? Was that what I heard?
We talked a little bit about how if you're going to use Raphael's tokens, then the contracts that are associated with them will effectively be wiped after the hard fork. I'll find a solution so that doesn't have to happen.
I see. So yeah, so after that point, I think it would be so cool if RChain made some kind of NFT sort of explainer video to educate people and invite them, and that whole,
yeah, like maybe
something that artists could share with one another.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, like something that could kind of explain that the NFTs on RChain also include the actual data, and B, the NFTs on RChain are not going to destroy the planet.
And they're a great deal less expensive.
And the fees, that's the other one. Yeah, the fees are just like ridiculous.
Yeah, like we could make like a great little explainer video And, that would be potentially another component for investors, I feel, but also potentially on the videos that were also going to be made about blockchain itself.
Well, yeah, and I'd say priority number one, help these artists do what they're wanting to do, because they're doing some really cool shit, and they're stepping back now, and we have to free them.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many that we could reach out to. I feel like the press is talking about them all the time.
Yeah.
I think we should reach out to them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, that is a fascinating development.
I'm pretty excited about the whole thing. I think it'll really kick off a new understanding of blockchain. Right? The problem is that the public kind of flirts with these ideas without actually going very deep. Yeah. Even this New York Times reporter, she flirts with it without going very deep. RChain has been around for a very long time. A simple Google search would have found, a Google search on proof of stake networks would have found RChain.
Right.
So, but I mean, it's difficult to wrap your mind around all the stuff. It's difficult to go deep on these things.
You think it's difficult for you? Imagine how it is for the rest of us. Are you kidding?
Exactly.
If you think it's difficult, there's no hope for anybody.
well, I mean, but I think also the job of a reporter is more to only tell a pre-digested version of the story anyway, right? That's kind of their job. And so it's she has to make a living, so she has to tell another story and another story and another story, and so she doesn't have enough time to digest the whole thing. So anyway, it's like there's this process by which these narratives unfold, and we have to just keep staying with the process.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm excited about the potential of NFTs. Like the way they've originally been utilized is a little kind of yucky. Like it kind of exposes a part of culture that I'm just not crazy about. The idea of kind of hoarding an object, and the whole kind of baseball card collection thing. I mean, it's not something I'm into, but I can appreciate people getting into that. But to me, like when you think about like what could be called NFT 2.0, like where the idea could be taken, the way like how perhaps artists could crowdfund their albums. They could fund a release before it's made, so they can kind of get busy and get to work. There's a lot of kind of more utilitarian uses that people could get out of the ideas surrounding an NFT. That gets me excited.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, we are basically out of time.
Yes.
But this has been a great conversation as usual. And I think there's a lot that the community can learn from these conversations that we have. So thank you, everyone. For those listening, make sure you're subscribed to RChain on YouTube, and you can follow RChain on social media. And if you'd like to become a member, you can do so at rchain.coop. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.